modern world was built on oil, but the man who conquered oil, John D. Rockefeller, was not an industrialist. He was a conqueror. In the feverish chaos of the Pennsylvania oil rush, a world of wild speculators and reckless dreamers, he was the only cool mind. He was not interested in finding oil. He was interested in controlling the men who found it. This is not the story of Standard Oil. It is the anatomy of the mind of a predator who understood that in the new religion of capitalism, piety is a sin, competition is a waste, and absolute efficiency is the only God. But a mind of this nature, a mind so devoid of passion and so full of a cold purpose, is not born. It is forged. It is built piece by piece in the furnace of contradiction. And to understand the predator, we must first dissect the psychological duality that created him. His mind was the battleground between two opposing forces, his father and his mother. His father was William Avery Rockefeller, simply known as Devil Bill. He was not a father. He was a con artist, a snake oil salesman, a bigamist, a charlatan who disappeared for months, leaving his family in poverty, only to return with pockets full of ill-gotten money. Devil Bill openly boasted that his method of upbringing was deceiving his children whenever he could. Why? To sharpen them. He taught John from the cradle the darkest lesson of psychology, that every human interaction is a transaction, that each person has a price, and that trust is the incurable weakness of a fool. And in the opposite corner was his mother, Eliza Davison. She was the antithesis of Bill, a devout Baptist, austere, silent, and moralistic. While the father taught deception, the mother taught strict discipline, thrift, and the fear of God. It was she who instilled in him the pathological frugality, the idea that every saved penny was a sign of moral virtue. This clash of opposing forces did not create a broken man. It created the perfect mask. Rockefeller's psyche became an impregnable fortress. On the outside, visible to the world, was his mother's quiet piety, serenity, and austere discipline. But behind that pious mask operated his father's calculating, cold, and immoral mind. He learned to be Devil Bill in his actions, while presenting himself to the world as Eliza in his behavior. At 16, in his first real job as an accounting assistant, Rockefeller found his true religion. With his first paycheck, he didn't buy clothes. He bought a small accounting book. He called it Ledger A. This book became his Bible. He meticulously recorded every cent earned and every cent spent. This ledger was more than accounting. It was a philosophy. It was the revelation that his mother's moral universe and his father's chaotic universe could be tamed by a single force: numbers. Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't feel. Numbers have no mercy. Rockefeller understood that passion, luck, morality, and even religion were just variables that could be calculated. The world was not governed by good and evil. It was governed by debit and credit. It was the birth of the cold mind. The Ledger A was the first brick of Standard Oil. And armed with this new faith in numbers, Rockefeller prepared to build his empire. But he did not do it by competing. He did it by knowing. This is the first and most crucial tactic of the cold mind. The war is won before the first shot is fired. Victory is not decided by courage. It is decided by information. While his rivals in the 1860s ran like frantic players, speculating on new wells and betting their fortunes on hunches, Rockefeller stayed in his office in Cleveland and built his first weapon, a private intelligence agency. He was not building a refinery, he was building an espionage network. His devotion to the numbers in his ledger book A expanded. Now he not only wanted to know his own numbers, he wanted to know the numbers of everyone else. He hired spies. He infiltrated rival refineries as accountants, as workers. He bribed telegraph company employees to hand over copies of their competitors' messages. He put railroad freight agents on his payroll. The result was that, while his rivals operated in the fog of capitalist war, Rockefeller operated with the precision of a god who sees everything. He knew exactly how much oil each competitor was refining. He knew which customers they were selling to. He knew the exact price of each barrel. He knew the shipping routes they used. He knew when they were expanding, and most importantly, he knew when they were desperate for money. This information network became an invisible and paralyzing weapon. It allowed Rockefeller to predict the movements of his rivals before they made them. He could anticipate a price drop and sell his reserves. He could see a competitor securing a big contract and quietly undermine it with a better offer. While others speculated, he calculated. While they bet, he secured. Rockefeller understood that silence was his armor and information was his sword. He rarely spoke in public. In meetings, he let his more volatile partners speak while he observed, gathering data. He became famous for his impassivity, a mask of Baptist serenity that concealed the calculating mind processing thousands of data points. This obsession with total knowledge gave him the confidence to take the next step. The step that would transform him from a successful simple refiner into the architect of an economic war machine. He understood, thanks to his ledgers and his espionage network, a fundamental truth that all others ignored. The real business was not in drilling wells. That was a gamble. The true power lay in transportation. Oil was useless if it couldn't reach the market. It was a dirty liquid in a Pennsylvania field. Whoever controlled the arteries, the railroads, would control the blood flow of the entire industry. And armed with this knowledge, Rockefeller did not go to compete. He went to conspire. His goal was the kings of the world of the time, the railroad magnates, men like Cornelius Vanderbilt and Tom Scott. These men were arrogant, temperamental, and powerful. But Rockefeller, with his cold mind, did not see titans. He saw a chaotic system, and chaos to him was simply inefficiency waiting to be exploited. He did not go to them with his hat in hand, asking for a favor. He went to them with his ledger, offering a deal. While the other refiners sent their barrels erratically, 10 one day, 50 the next, Rockefeller offered them something they lacked: predictability. He essentially said, "I will guarantee 60 tank cars of oil per day, every day, like clockwork. I will fill your trains, both inbound and outbound. Your chaos will become efficiency. In exchange, I want a discount." This was the rebate, or secret discount. The railroads, desperate for a steady flow of income in a volatile industry, accepted it ecstatically. Instantly, Rockefeller's transportation costs were cut in half or less than those of his rivals. He was already winning a war that his competitors didn't even realize was being fought. He could sell cheaper than anyone else and still make more profit. This alone would have been enough to build an empire. But for Rockefeller, this was only the first move. It was the defensive tactic. Then he revealed his true genius. The dark psychology of Devil Bill merged with the mathematical coldness of his ledger. He returned to the railroads, now dependent on his volume, and demanded something more. He demanded a drawback, a rebate. The idea was so bold that it was psychopathic. Rockefeller not only demanded a discount for himself, he demanded that the railroads pay him, to Standard Oil, a commission for every barrel of oil sent by his competitors. Let's stop and dissect the psychology of this tactic. It is, perhaps, the most ruthless and elegant maneuver in the history of capitalism. First, Rockefeller was not only lowering his own costs, he was actively increasing the costs of his rivals. The railroads, to compensate for the money they had to pay Rockefeller, raised rates for everyone else. But it's deeper than that. He created a closed system where his competitors, unknowingly, were financing their own annihilation. Every time an independent refiner in Cleveland managed to close a deal, every time he sold a barrel, every time he celebrated a small victory, a part of that sale went directly into John D. Rockefeller's pocket. He was getting stronger with each success of his enemies. He was drinking the blood of his rivals, and they thanked him for the transportation service. This is vampire tactics. Competition became impossible. It was a rigged game. If a rival tried to compete on price, Rockefeller could lower his price even more because his costs were artificially low. And if the rival, miraculously, managed to make a sale, the drawback of that very sale gave Rockefeller the money and information needed to crush him in the next round. It was a checkmate from which no one, except him, knew the rules. Armed with his espionage network that told him who was weak, and this financial weapon that weakened them even further, his rivals were wounded and bleeding, although most did not yet realize it. They were economically anemic. Rockefeller did not move immediately for the massacre. A cool mind knows that patience is the sharpest weapon. And now it was time to besiege the city. The chaos of the oil industry had an epicenter, Cleveland, Ohio. It was the nerve center of refining, with dozens of small competitors fighting among themselves. For Rockefeller, this disorganization was an aesthetic offense. It was an inefficiency that had to be purged. So he launched the next phase of his plan, the tactic that would turn competition into a war of attrition: predatory pricing. Rockefeller, through Standard Oil, began to sell his refined kerosene in key markets below the cost of production. Let's understand the psychology of this. I was losing money with every barrel I sold. For any normal speculator, this would be ruin. It would be panic. But Rockefeller was not a speculator. He was a general. He was not trying to make money. He was trying to win the war. Meanwhile, his rivals, who were already paying inflated transportation fees secretly financed by Rockefeller, looked at their accounting books with horror. Suddenly, they couldn't sell their product. How could they compete with a price that was below their cost to produce? They panicked. They tried to match the price. And that's where Rockefeller's cold genius destroyed them. The average competitor had cash reserves for a few weeks, maybe a few months. Rockefeller, thanks to his ledgers, his pathological frugality, and his secret deals, had almost unlimited capital reserves. He could afford to lose money for 6 months, a year, or as long as necessary. He was not competing. He was besieging. It is the mentality of a reptile, a cold-blooded predator that can remain motionless, without eating for months, waiting for its prey to weaken. His rivals ran frantically, bleeding cash every day, taking out loans, mortgaging their houses, trying to survive a price war they did not understand. Rockefeller simply waited. His cold mind enjoyed the efficiency of the maneuver. He looked at his ledgers and calculated, not his profits, but the exact time it would take for his competitor to bleed out to bankruptcy. He used his capital and patience as a siege weapon. Day after day, the price was kept artificially low. Rival refineries began to close, workers were laid off, men who had invested their life savings in the oil dream faced total ruin. They were confused, terrified, and broken. And only then, when panic was at its peak, when desperation was absolute, when the prey was wounded and collapsing on the forest floor, only then did the predator emerge from the shadows. But he did not come to kill. He came to offer peace. This was the most infamous chapter of his conquest, known as the Cleveland Massacre. In just 6 weeks in 1872, Rockefeller, at 32 years old, moved to consolidate the entire industry. He would summon his rivals, one by one, to his office. These men would enter pale, sweaty, on the brink of financial ruin, expecting annihilation. But they did not find a shouting tyrant. They found Mr. Rockefeller, the devout Baptist, speaking in a soft, almost funeral voice. And here, he executed the most brilliant psychological tactic of all, false pity. He did not threaten them. He did not shout at them. Simply, with icy calmness, he would open his ledger books. He would show them, with the coldness of a mathematician, the war they had already lost. He would show them the railroad contracts. He would display the drawback rates they were paying. He would demonstrate, with irrefutable numbers, that their business model was a death sentence. He would say, "Look, this is what I pay for transportation. This is what you pay. I am losing money selling at this price, but as you can see in my reserves, I can continue like this indefinitely. You cannot." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the moment when the victim finally saw the face of his murderer. And then, just at the moment of total despair, Rockefeller made his offer. It was not a purchase offer. It was an act of generosity. He told them, Your refineries are on the brink of bankruptcy. They are worth nothing. But I, for the good of the industry, for the good of God, offer you a fair price for your assets. I offer you shares of Standard Oil. Join me. Or you can refuse, and I will continue selling below cost for another week. And then I will buy your refineries at the bankruptcy auction for cents on the dollar. The choice is yours. This is dark psychology in its purest form. The mirage of choice. They gave broken men the illusion that they were making a business decision when in fact they were signing an unconditional surrender. It was a form of annihilation that allowed the victim to feel that they had participated in it. It was less dirty, more efficient. One by one, they bowed. 22 of their 26 competitors in Cleveland sold out in 6 weeks. The Cleveland massacre was not won with weapons, but with a ledger and a soft voice. It was not a negotiation. It was an ultimatum disguised as a merger. Rockefeller was not building a monopoly. He was conducting a conquest, offering clemency to fallen feudal lords in exchange for their sworn loyalty. And so, the war ended. 90% of the world's oil refining capacity was now in the hands of a single man. But how did such a pious man, a devout Baptist, justify such a brutal conquest? How did he see his reflection in the mirror? This is where we find the final psychological weapon, the one he used against himself: moral compartmentalization. Rockefeller's mind was not that of a comic villain. He did not see himself as a thief. He saw himself as a savior. And to maintain this vision, his psyche executed its most impressive maneuver: divine justification. Rockefeller was a devout Baptist. He tithed 10% of every dollar he earned, even the cents he earned in his early jobs. He tithed the money he obtained from vampiric drawbacks. He tithed the money he earned by bankrupting his neighbors. How did he reconcile this? The answer is simple. He did not. He saw no contradiction. In his cold and orderly mind, he was not breaking God's laws. He was obeying them. The oil world he found was a sinful chaos, wasteful, reckless, chaotic, full of gamblers and drunks. He believed, with absolute religious conviction, that God had chosen him, John D. Rockefeller, a man of discipline, order, and numbers, to impose divine order on that chaotic industry. Cruelty was not a sin. It was a necessary tool. Competition was the chaos of the devil. Monopoly was God's order. He voiced this belief in his most famous analogy, the justification that became the credo of the robber barons. He said, and I quote, "The growth of a great business is simply the survival of the fittest. The American beauty rose can only produce its maximum splendor and fragrance that delight those who behold it if the other buds growing around it are sacrificed." This is not just a business metaphor. It is a psychological confession. He was the rose. His rivals were the insignificant shoots that had to be cut, sacrificed for the sake of a greater beauty. He was not being ruthless. He was being God's gardener. He was pruning the garden of humanity. This belief made him unstoppable. How can you negotiate with a man who believes he is fulfilling a prophecy? How can you appeal to the morality of a man who believes his cruelty is the supreme moral act? He was not just accumulating wealth. He was accumulating proof of his divine righteousness. Each $1 million was a sign of God's approval. His ledger was not just a business record. It was his private conversation with the Almighty. He conquered the world, became the richest man in modern history, and did it all with the clear conscience of a saint, convinced that every competitor he destroyed was a necessary sacrifice on the altar of efficiency. And once the world was at his feet, once the war was over and the rose was in full bloom, he set out to execute his final tactic, the most ruthless of all. It was not a tactic to make money, but to gain eternity. Rockefeller spent the first half of his life amassing one of the greatest fortunes the world has ever seen, using tactics that caused his contemporaries to call him the most hated man in America. He was dragged before Congress, demonized by the press as a rapacious octopus strangling the nation. His name became synonymous with tyranny. And then, with the same cold efficiency with which he built his empire, he began to give it away. This is where we see the final tactic of the predator, the war for the legacy, the whitening of reputation. Rockefeller didn't just retire, he reinvented himself. He created modern strategic philanthropy. He founded the University of Chicago, creating a world-class institution out of nothing. He established the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, which eradicated diseases like yellow fever and hookworm, saving millions of lives. He funded education, science, and medicine on an unprecedented scale. Let's not be mistaken. These acts had immense benefits for humanity. But on the level of dark psychology, it was the greatest public relations act in history. It was the most successful legacy whitening ever executed. Rockefeller used the money he obtained through ruthless means to literally wash his own name from the pages of history. He bought his redemption. He ensured that, over time, the stench of spilled kerosene and the broken lives of his rivals would be replaced by the antiseptic smell of hospitals and the polished wood of university libraries. This is the final tactic to destroy your rivals. Not just defeating them on the battlefield, not just taking their assets, but living longer than them, and then paying to ensure that your version of history is the only one that survives. Today, the name Rockefeller is not associated with the Cleveland Massacre or the vampiric drawbacks. It is associated with philanthropy, medicine, and prestige. The gardener did not just cut the other shoots. He made sure no one remembered they ever existed. He won the war, rewrote history, and founded a dynasty. And he did it all not with an explosive temper or fiery passion, but with the coldest, quietest, and most lethal weapon of all, a mind that saw the world not as a human drama, but as a simple ledger.